The good rhymes, not the bad ones.
Ambassador Abshire, thank you for being here this morning and educating us about presidential executive orders. House of Representatives now in session. Balanced budget amendment to the Constitution is on their agenda for today. Thanks for being with us on this Thursday morning.
Pursuant to the order of the House on January 5th, 2011, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with each party limited to 1 hour and each member other than the majority or minority leaders and the minority whip limited to 5 minutes each. But no event, the debate will continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Alabama, Ms. Sewell, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Ethel Harris Hall, who passed away last Saturday at the age of 83. Dr. Ethel Hall was one of Alabama's premier educators and one of our nation's strongest advocates for children. She was the first African-American to serve on the Alabama State Board of Education, and she was the first African-American and the longest-serving vice chair of the Board of Education. She served as the State Board of Education's vice president for 10 years and presided over meetings in the absence of the governor. Dr. Ethel Hall retired 10 months ago after serving on the Alabama State Board of Education for 24 years. Dr. Ethel Hall was born to Harry and to Fannie Mae Harris on February 23, 1928. The Harris family lived in Morgan County, Alabama, and due to the limited educational opportunities in their area, they sent their daughter to live with her grandparents in Jefferson County so that she could attend school in North Birmingham. She attended Parker High School in Birmingham until she moved back home with her parents to attend Council Training School, a laboratory high school of Alabama A&M. She graduated valedictorian of her high school class and then attended Alabama A&M University, where she received a graduate degree, a bachelor's degree of science, cum laude, in 1948. Dr. Ethel Hall went on to obtain master's degrees from the University of Chicago and Atlanta University. She taught in the Hale County, Jefferson County, and Birmingham City school systems, and later became the first African-American faculty member of the University of Montevallo. Dr. Ethel Hall continued to further her education by attending the University of Alabama, where she received and earned a doctorate of social work in 1979. She later taught in the School of Social Work at the University of Alabama. After decades of teaching, Dr. Ethel Hall entered politics, and she was elected the first African-American member of the Alabama State Board of Education on January 19, 1987. She went on to serve 6 terms before becoming vice chair in 1994. Dr. Ethel Hall served on the State Board of Education for 24 years and was named Vice President Emerita. Dr. Hall served on the State Board of Education during many of its tumultuous battles over issues such as funding levels in schools, teacher testing, accountability standards for schools, and academic standards for students. In making these tough decisions, she always remained principled, putting Alabama's children first. Dr. Ethel Hall wrote about her long career in education in a recent published autobiography, My Journey, a memoir of the first African-American to preside over the Alabama Board of Education. I rise today to remember Dr. Ethel Hall on the floor of the United States Congress as a trailblazing Alabamian, a gifted teacher, and a strong advocate for the education of our nation's children. Dr. Hall was a mentor to so many educators throughout the state of Alabama and this nation, including my own mother, Mrs. Nancy Gardner Sewell. Through her numerous mentoring relationships, Dr. Hall encouraged teachers to use their talents to positively affect the lives of the students that they taught. Not only did she lead by example, she also trained and mentored the next generation of educational leaders. Indeed, my generation owes pioneers like Dr. Hall a debt of gratitude. Dr. Ethel Hall sowed the seeds for the opportunities that now flourish for so many. I know that I stand on the shoulders of many great giants like Dr. Ethel Hall. On election night, November 2nd, 2010, several trailblazing Alabama women made the trip to Selma, Alabama to be there when I was elected. I will never forget that Dr. Ethel Hall was one of them. Her presence meant so much to me, more than she will ever know. It was her light that guided the path that led me to become Alabama's first African-American Congresswoman. Dr. Ethel Hall was the epitome of a servant leader. She led by example and was motivated by a driving passion that all children deserve a quality education. Dr. Hall was preceded in death by her husband of 55 years, Mr. Alfred Hall. She is survived by 2 children, Donna and Alfred, and a host of family and friends who will miss her dearly. Today, I ask my colleagues in the United States House of Representatives to join me in celebrating the life and legacy of this extraordinary Alabamian. Let Dr. Hall's life stand as a testament to the courage and strength of one individual's ability to shape the lives of so many. We should be renewed by her love of learning and recommit ourselves to providing the resources that our nation's greatest advocates, its children, need. I ask that we all pay tribute and homage to Dr. Ethel Hall. I yield back the balance of my time. Thanks.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Long, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There once was a man named Mel, and when he'd step to this microphone, he would give a Mel. I rise today to recognize a former member of this body and a friend and mentor, Congressman Mel Hancock. He would sign all of his letters or emails, whatever he'd sign, with the same thing: yours for better but less government. That's what Mel believed. When Senator Jim Talent first came to this body, he asked Mel to help him vote. He said, "Mel, can you show me how to use the voting machine here?" He said, "Sure, Jim, come over here." He said, "You see, if you want to vote no, you push the red button. And if you have a conflict, you can't vote on an issue, you push the yellow button for P, for present." And he turned and walked off. Senator Talent said, "Hey, Mel, what's the green button for?" Mel turned around and said, "I don't know, I've never used it." Mel died peacefully in his home, in his sleep, on November the 6th in Springfield, Missouri. Mel was a champion of limited government. Mel knew that our founding fathers understood the corrupting influence of power on the human character, which is why they championed personal freedom. The idea that a government by the people and for the people should preserve liberty for future generations. Like our founders, Mel was a wise man, a good man, who worked tirelessly to defend people's liberty. Mel was a true Ozarkian. He was born in Cape Fear, Missouri in 1936. He graduated from college and enlisted in the Air Force in 1951, where he would serve in active duty till 1953. Following active duty, Mel stayed in the Air Force Reserves until 1965, where he attained the rank of first lieutenant. After military service, Mel went into business, co-founding a security system equipment leasing company. However, Mel's dedication to his country did not end with his military service. As a businessman and a voter, Mel was upset with the way things were being done in the state of Missouri and Washington, D.C. In 1977, Mel founded the Taxpayer Survival Association. I can still see the bumper sticker today with a lifesaver on it, like you'd throw off of a boat or a ship. A not-for-profit organization dedicated to advancing a constitutional amendment to limit taxes. He was a one-man show. He'd go around Missouri getting signatures. You might see him up in Kansas City standing in the parking lot in front of a mall in a rainstorm, getting people to sign his tax and spending amendment petition to put on the ballot. Through his hard work with the Hancock Amendment, it was added to the Missouri Constitution in 1980. Mel used this passage to continue his advocacy for responsible government and for the rights of individuals to be free from an overburdensome government. Mel's convictions took him to Congress in 1988, where he represented southwest Missouri for 8 years. I always called Mel the reluctant congressman. He didn't want to be a congressman. He didn't want to come to Washington, D.C., but he was just pulled in that direction by people. They said, "Mel, you've got to go. You've got to do it." And I am honored to now occupy that same congressional seat, Missouri 7. During his time in Congress from 1988 to 1996, he worked in the House Ways and Means Committee to advance the cause of liberty. He also championed a balanced budget amendment, his signature issue, which I'm proud to say we're going to vote on a balanced budget amendment this week. Mel retired from Congress in 1996. He didn't retire because he couldn't win another election, but because he had promised the people of southwest Missouri that he would not serve more than 4 terms in office. With Mel, a promise made was a promise kept, something that Washington would do well to remember these days. Now, over 30 years since the passage of the Hancock Amendment, with our current budget problems, it reveals just how right Mel was. We would not have a $15 trillion, that's right, we went over $15 trillion yesterday. We would not have a $15 trillion debt or massive runaway government spending if we had a Hancock Amendment on the national level. Mel was much beloved by his neighbors, friends, and family in the Missouri 7th District and was one of my mentors. Our thoughts and prayers are with his wife, Shug, who Mel always referred to as the boss, his sons Lee, Kim, and his daughter Lou Ann, and their families. Mel will be missed, but his legacy, the legacy that he created and the ideas that he championed will continue. His legacy will forever be a part of Missouri through the Hancock Amendment and his service to his constituents. Mel meant the world to me, and I will continue to champion the ideas that he dedicated his life fighting for. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Higgins, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, we are approaching the deadline for the Super Committee to propose a debt reduction plan. Most economists are in agreement on what we need to do. In the long term, reduce debt by at least $4 trillion over 10 years through a mix of added revenues and reduced spending. In the short term, make immediate investments to create jobs and to reduce unemployment. I encourage the Super Committee not to ignore the second of those priorities, because now is a perfect time to create jobs by making large-scale investments in American infrastructure. Since World War II, every economic contraction was followed by a period of economic expansion. But although economists tell us the recession has ended, we have had no economic expansion. Unemployment remains at 9%. Economic growth is projected to be moderate at best. The reason our economy is taking so long to recover is because this recession was more severe than any since the Great Depression, something that seemingly few in government, finance, or academia realized at the time. Because of the historic severity of this recession, American households, local and state governments, and European governments find themselves in debt like never before. Consequently, consumer demand is and will be depressed while households and governments reduce spending. And when demand falls, businesses don't hire. It is that simple. Some believe this period of decreased demand will last 5 to 7 years. A policy of fiscal austerity will make matters only worse. We only have to look back at the United States in 1937, Japan in the 1990s, and Europe last year and this year to understand that when consumers are not spending, the worst thing a government can do is stop spending itself. The new American Foundation report makes the case that investing $1.2 trillion over the next 5 years in rebuilding our infrastructure will create 22 million jobs. 22 million jobs over a 5-year period. That is more than the 22 million jobs that were created under President Clinton. And the job creation of the 1990s raised so much revenue that our federal budget reached record surplus. Times were so good that we were debating at that time the implications of repaying the entirety of the nation's debt. The lesson that greatest debt and deficit reduction tool is job creation. That is why the Super Committee must include significant job creation components in its recommendations. Let me add, Mr. Speaker, that our infrastructure is sorely in need of massive investment. Our roads, bridges, airports, energy grid, water infrastructure are all in horrible condition. The World Economic Forum ranks America 23rd in infrastructure quality. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives our infrastructure a D grade. Transportation for America reports that there are 63,000 structurally deficient bridges in our country, including 99 in my community of Western New York. The Chamber of Commerce has said that unless we repair our infrastructure, we will suffer $336 billion in lost growth over the next 5 years. To my colleagues who believe that we can't afford to make investment at this time, I say we can't afford not to. Delaying the repair or replacement of infrastructure by just 2 years can increase the cost of doing those repairs by a factor of 5. I also note that we just spent $62 billion nation building in Iraq and $73 billion nation building in Afghanistan. There was no objection when the borrowing to finance that nation building, nor should there be objection now when we're proposing to do nation building right here at home. And given the current conditions, economic conditions, financing American infrastructure projects will never be cheaper. Interest rates are extremely low. The cost of labor and materials are low due to lack of demand, and the equipment is cheap because it is idle. Repairing and expanding our infrastructure work is that we need to do to stay globally competitive, and we will never be cheaper to do it than it is to do today. Quite simply, there is much work to be done, and a lot of Americans need to do work. Now is the best time to do that. Mr. Speaker, a large-scale $1.2 trillion 5-year investment in infrastructure would create 27 million jobs that cannot be shipped overseas. It will reduce unemployment. It will reduce the deficit. And in the end, we will have an infrastructure our economy needs and our country deserves. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York yields back his time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Meehan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of H.R. 733, the Pancreatic Cancer Research Education Act. Oftentimes we talk about numbers, Mr. Speaker, but often there's the occasion to actually talk to the people who are behind the bills. One of the most moving experiences I have had is to have had a visit to my office by a young woman by the name of Sienna Gonzalez, who visited with her mother and her family. You see, Sienna's mother is a victim of pancreatic cancer. And Sienna is on a mission, along with many of her friends, to help people fight to find a cure for pancreatic cancer. She took a lead by urging so many of her friends and colleagues in her classroom, and I hold in my hand just one of the volumes of hundreds upon hundreds of letters that came and were so moving. The facts speak for themselves. 43,000 Americans will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. 36,000 will die just this year. And the lifetime of expectation after announcement of that is about 3 to 6 months. I think the words are better said, however, by some of the students. People are losing a lot of friends, writes Allie, and family because of this horrible, horrifying disease. We are trying to help. Did you know that this disease is one of the few cancers for which survival has not improved substantially? In over 40 years, survival rates have not changed. The average lifespan after diagnosis is 3 to 6 months. Please use more of your research money to help these people if you can. Thank you. That's just one of the hundreds of letters. I want to express my deep appreciation to Dr. Timothy Quinn, the superintendent of the Methacton School District, Mrs. Melissa Gore, the principal, but mostly the hundreds and hundreds of students who have taken the time to assure that their voice be heard. As they said, pancreatic cancer, know it, fight it, end it. Thank you for your role in making sure that my colleagues understand the importance of this great challenge and the opportunity that we have to fight for those with pancreatic cancer. Mr. Speaker, if I may, just very quickly, I rise to honor the 1st Troop Philadelphia City Cavalry on the occasion of their 237th anniversary. This volunteer cavalry troop was the first of its kind organized in the defense of our country during the American Revolution. Through those hard-fought years is where the original members forged concepts of service and a body of tradition which is kept alive today by its current members. The 1st Troop Cavalry is a private military organization whose membership is comprised of members of the Pennsylvania Army National Guard who serve in A Troop 1st Squadron, 104th Cavalry in the 28th Infantry Division. Many of the members have served overseas, including Afghanistan and Iraq. Their service to our country is immeasurable. We should all be extremely thankful. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania yields back his time. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 5 minutes, also to include extraneous material for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise again to really beat the drum about the ongoing crisis of poverty and unemployment in America. On November 6th, the Associated Press reported that we have crossed a terrible threshold. More job seekers now in America have run out of unemployment benefits than are receiving them. Simply put, the majority of Americans who are struggling to find a job are no longer getting unemployment benefits. We need to extend unemployment benefits, and we need to do it now. Not just for those who are about to run out, but for the millions of Americans whose benefits ran out a long time ago. The millions who ran out of time to establish the careers. The millions who ran out of time to safeguard their families' futures. For the millions who ran out of time to ignite the fires of the American dream. Congressman Bobby Scott and I have a bill, H.R. 589, which will give millions of families just a little more time to find a good job, to make a secure home, and would provide this bridge over troubled waters while our nation and the economy recovers. Extending benefits for the 99ers is the right thing to do for millions of Americans who were laid off through no fault of their own. They watched as corporations took over their government and ran the economy into the ground. They watched as the banks raided the nation's treasury and lined their pockets with massive bonuses while millions of Americans lost their jobs. They watched as our nation's future was traded away for needless wars and tax cuts for billionaires. Mr. Speaker, the American people are sick and tired. They don't want to watch anymore. They don't want to wait anymore. They have run out of time. Nearly 50 million Americans are already living in poverty, struggling to feed their families and to keep a roof over their heads. Countless millions are living on the edge. They are desperately trying to stay one step ahead of disaster, living from paycheck to paycheck and waiting for the other shoe to drop. The American people really have run out of patience. They don't want to hear that the most powerful nation in the world is broke. They don't believe it when they are told that we can't afford Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security or unemployment benefits when we are spending $1 trillion on wars halfway around the world. They don't want to hear empty promises from the Republicans in Congress who take responsibility to ensure that the poor in America, and I quote, have food in their stomachs and that they have a roof over their head, even while they pass bills that slash affordable housing programs, cut nutrition funding for women and children, a program which is very important. Americans know that the rich should pay their fair share and that working men and women of America deserve more. They don't want this generation to be the first generation of Americans who won't do better than the last one. Americans want to move ahead, and they want those who have benefited the most from our economy to pay what they owe to the 99% of the American people who are the real engines of our economy and the heart of our democracy. The generation that is marching in the streets right now are asking what went wrong in the pursuit of their American dream. So let's pass H.R. 589 and give Americans a little more time to land that job that gets their family back on their feet. You know, when you run out of unemployment benefits after 99 weeks, that's it. That's it. So we must extend unemployment benefits, but we also need to extend, as our bill says, at least an additional 14 weeks so that those who've hit the 99-week wall have some form of survival until we can figure out a way to create jobs. So we must pass the American Jobs Act to reinvest in the future of this country and build up our roads and bridges, repair our sewer lines, and build the 21st century schools for all of our students. Let's put America back on track with American jobs, American manufacturing, American ingenuity, and American leadership toward a brighter tomorrow for all Americans. We must build these ladders of opportunity. We have to remove these barriers and these obstacles. And let me tell you, not having a job is a huge barrier and a huge obstacle to reigniting the American dream. And so we must extend unemployment benefits, but we must not forget that there are those who have hit 99 weeks who are no longer even eligible for unemployment benefits. And as the AP article says, we now have over 2 million people now who won't even be eligible for unemployment compensation. That's 2.2 million people. They won't even be eligible, even if we extend unemployment benefits. So let's work to try to figure out how to, one, create jobs, but to provide some safety net for those who really do want to work, and people want to work. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from California yields back her time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Jones, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I, again, will keep coming to the floor twice a week when we're in session to talk about bringing our troops out of Afghanistan. It is a war that bin Laden is dead, bin Laden is dead, and we need to start thinking about, as the lady said before me, let's think about what America needs and not what Afghanistan needs. And that brings me to this point of the talk I want to give today, Mr. Speaker. On February the 16th of 2011, then Secretary of Defense Gates testified before the House Armed Services Committee, which I serve on, and I'd like to read his comments. By the end of this calendar year, we expect less than 100,000 troops to be deployed in both of the major post-9/11 combat theaters, virtually all of those forces being in Afghanistan. That is why we believe that beginning in fiscal year 2015, and that's important, Mr. Speaker, that is why we believe that beginning in fiscal year 2015, the United States can, with minimal risk, begin reducing Army active duty in strength by 27,000 and the Marine Corps by somewhere between 15 and 20,000. These projections assume that the number of troops in Afghanistan would be significantly reduced by the end of 2014 in accordance with the present strategy. Mr. Speaker, I read that because I read the same statement to the new Secretary of Defense, Mr. Panetta, who I have great respect for, and I asked him, do you have the authority to change those timelines? He said no, because this is what the President has agreed to. Well, Mr. President, I'm calling on you to reconsider, because beside me is a poster, and beside that poster is a flag-draped coffin coming out off of a plane at Dover. And the headlines in the Greensboro paper said, "Get out." It is time to bring our troops home. They've done everything they've been asked to do. And that reminds me, a few weeks ago I went to Walter Reed at Bethesda, it's the new consolidated military hospital here in Washington. And I saw 4 Marines from my district, Camp Lejeune. 3 of the 4 have lost both legs. The one that had not lost both legs was a Lance Corporal who asked me with his mom in the room, "Congressman, why are we still in Afghanistan?" And I looked into the young man's face and I said, "I don't know why we're still there. Y'all have won many, many battles, and it's time to bring you home." And the only thing he said, Mr. Speaker, was thank you. That brings me to a letter that I received from a retired Marine down in my district about a year ago. He said, "I am writing this letter to express my concern over the current Afghan war. I'm a retired Marine officer with 31+ years of active duty." Let me go down in the letter because that's another point I want to make. Our senior military leaders in Afghanistan continue to say that we are making progress, but at what cost to our country? The war is costing the United States billions of dollars a month to wage, and we still continue to get more young Americans killed. The Afghan war has no end state for us. I urge you to make contact with all the current and newly elected men and women in Congress and ask them to end this war and bring our young men and women home. If any of my comments will assist you in this effort, you are welcome to use them in my name. Mr. Speaker, I don't know why we've got this debt crisis facing our country, and yet we've got a a corrupt leader in Afghanistan named Karzai that one day likes America and the next day he hates America, and we send him $10 billion a month, and it's borrowed money from the Chinese. And yet we're going to say to the American people, we're going to cut the programs for little children, we're going to cut the programs for senior citizens, but Mr. Karzai, you'll get your $10 billion. And that brings me toward the end of my comments, Mr. Speaker. I contacted the Marine General, who's been a very dear friend of mine for a number of years. And he sends me questions to ask in committees to the Secretary of Defense and others who might be testifying. But something that has always stuck with me is what he closes this email with, and I have many emails. What do we say to the mother and father, the wife of the last Marine killed to support a corrupt government and a corrupt leader in a war that cannot be won? That is the question, and I hope the American people will call on Congress, both parties, to bring our troops home before 2014. And, Mr. Speaker, I close by asking God to please bless our men and women in uniform. I ask God to please bless the families of our men and women in uniform. I ask God in His loving arms to hold the families who've given a child dying for freedom in Afghanistan and Iraq. I ask God to bless the House and Senate that we will do what is right in the eyes of God for His people. And I ask God to give wisdom, strength, and courage to President Obama that he will do what is right in the eyes of God for His people. And 3 times I ask, God please, God please, God please continue to bless America. Let's bring our troops home. Thank you.
Members are reminded to address all of their remarks to the Chair. The Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Woolsey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every one of us in this Congress believes that keeping the nation safe, as well as providing benefits to our veterans as promised, is our very top priority. It's a question, however, of just how do we do that? And a decade of war and military occupation is not the best way. Whenever spending cuts are on the agenda, as they are right now with the Super Committee, racing to meet its deadline, military and defense programs continue to get a pass. Why should the Pentagon get a blank check while safety net programs have to look for change in the couch cushions to keep their programs going? It's time for the Pentagon to share in the sacrifice, especially since it's been so generously funded over the years. A 50% increase in the DoD budget over the last decade, bigger in real dollars today than it was at the height of the Cold War. Ending the war in Afghanistan would save at least $10 billion a month. Actually, it's more like 12 now. To say nothing of the lives we would save and the injuries that would be avoided. But I think we should go further in cutting the base Pentagon budget. Just to give a few examples, I'm a longtime advocate of eliminating the V-22 Osprey aircraft. It's a program that, if we eliminated it, would save $10 billion, and it's a program that is notorious for cost overruns and for huge safety concerns. And we can dramatically reduce the nation's nuclear arsenal. Why do we need, I ask you this, why do we need 5,000 warheads when just one is enough to destroy life on Earth? We can wring huge savings out of the system by fundamentally changing how we think and how we deal with national security. For pennies on the dollar, we can keep America safe by implementing a smarter security policy, by supporting a civilian surge over a military surge. My smart security platform, which is HRES 19, would make war a very last resort and adopt a different posture toward the rest of the world. It's not isolationism. When I say I want to bring our troops home from Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm not saying we abandon those countries. I'm saying we must engage them in a different way. That means investing in their people and their capacity to lead lives free of deprivation and despair. So instead of weapons systems, let's invest more on development and humanitarian aid, more on maternal health programs, more on mosquito nets to prevent malaria, more on education, health care, micro-lending, etc., etc. You know what I would promote our national You know what would promote our national security, Mr. Speaker, like nothing else, is a genuine, well-funded commitment to eradicating poverty and malnutrition in the developing world. Instead of invasions and occupations, smart security emphasizes diplomacy. It emphasizes the civilian surge, multilateralism, and peaceful conflict resolution. It also calls for more investment in energy independence, nuclear non-proliferation, democracy promotion, and civil society programs abroad. Isn't that a better way to combat terrorism than sending 100,000 troops to a part of the world known for widespread anti-American sentiment? We must stop equating national security with armed aggression, because that's how we ended up with out-of-control Pentagon budgets and an ever more dangerous world. In fact, Mr. Speaker, military force has been proven to oftentimes undermine our security instead of enhancing it. Smart security protects America because it relies on the very best of American values: moral leadership, compassion, our commitment to peace and freedom. It costs pennies on the dollar, it is efficient and fiscally responsible. So let's bring our troops home, cut the Pentagon budget, and implement smart security now. Then we can have real cost savings in the United States. And, Mr. Speaker, that's just the way it is.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, halfway around the world in the desert of the sun and the valley of the gun, the American warrior stands fighting the forces of the enemy. But one such soldier returns from battle to America with a flag-draped coffin. He is Cody Norris, Army Private First Class, a machine gunner in the infantry, just 20 years old, barely an adult, but still an all-American man. For the Norris family in LaPorte, Texas, Cody was a son and a little brother. He died in a gun battle last week in Afghanistan for our country. He was the 38th warrior in my area of Texas to give his life for his country. Cody grew up in LaPorte. He graduated from LaPorte High School just last year, but he quickly volunteered for the United States Army in October. In high school, Cody loved to restore old military trucks. He restored a 1952 Dodge M37 Army truck and drove it to school. He was a member of the junior ROTC Color Guard at LaPorte High School. But this year, his former classmates and peers in the Color Guard honored his life. He was assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 34th Armored Regiment, 1st Heavy Brigade Combat Team, 1st Infantry Division at Fort Riley, Kansas, before deploying to Afghanistan. It was his first deployment in Afghanistan. October 1st marked his one-year anniversary in the United States Army. Cody was killed in the Kandahar province last week on November 9th when the enemy forces attacked his unit with small arms fire. Kandahar province in Afghanistan has been called the birthplace and fanatical home of the notorious Taliban. It is a dangerous part of the world. I've been to Afghanistan several times, and the sun is unbearable in the summer and the cold is brutally piercing in the winter. And our soldiers fight on, undeterred, tenaciously focused. They go to battle in a land seemingly cursed by God. Our military in Afghanistan go where others fear to tread, and the timid are not found. When I spoke to Cody's mother, Teresa Denise Norris, she told me Cody marched to the beat of his own drum. He didn't care what others thought of him. He did what he thought was right. She said Cody was proud to be a soldier and that their family believes in the red, white, and blue, and they all love this country. That pride is carried through in Cody's older brother, Michael Norris. He's a cadet in his last year at the United States Military Academy at West Point. The Norris family is a soldier's family. Cody's Facebook page is filled with heartfelt messages from his friends, classmates, and fellow soldiers. It is evident how much he made people laugh in his very young life. Cody wrote, on his Facebook in the About Me section, "I'm in the Army, and I'm an infantryman. I love what I do as my job and my dream in life, and no one can take that away from me. I am trained by the best, and I will be the best I can. Want to do all I can for the ones I love and my country to keep us all free, even if it means death, so that every American can live their dreams out as well." Cody loved what he did. He loved his country. He was selfless, and he was an American patriot. For his service in the United States Army, Cody has been awarded the Army Commendation Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal with 2 campaign stars, and the NATO Medal and the Combat Infantry Medal. Cody Norris was a part of the rare breed, the American breed. Soldiers who take care of the rest of us and watch for evildoers who would bring us harm. They proved their commitment to America by giving their lives for this nation. General George Patton said of the fallen soldiers, "Let us not only mourn for the men who have died fighting, but let us be grateful to God that such men ever lived." Mr. Speaker, we are grateful to Private First Class Cody Norris and that he lived. He was a Texan, a soldier, an American warrior. And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Bass, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Request unanimous consent to address the House. Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, so ordered.
I rise today in recognition of the 12th Annual National Adoption Day this Friday, November 18th. As we prepare for Thanksgiving festivities with loved ones, many of us take for granted our opportunity to spend time with family and friends. But for thousands of foster youth around the country, celebrating a holiday with a permanent family remains out of reach. In the United States today, there are more than 400,000 children in foster care, some waiting years to be adopted by a permanent, loving family. Although the number of youth without a home seems discouraging, there is hope. This week, in recognition of National Adoption Day, an unprecedented number of courts in 400 communities throughout the country will open their doors to finalize the adoption of thousands of children from the foster care system. National Adoption Day is a nationwide effort to raise awareness of children in foster care who are eligible and waiting for adoption, as well as to celebrate families that have been chosen to make a lasting difference in the life of a child through adoption or relative-based care. Since 2000, more than 35,000 children have been adopted through National Adoption Day activities. This year, nearly 5,000 adoptions will be finalized. In California alone, my home state, 500 youth will be adopted through these special events. While the number of children in foster care has significantly decreased over the past decade, the number of adoptions have remained unchanged. Youth often wait years in foster care before finding a permanent family through adoption. During their time in foster care, children are moved from home to home, changing schools, losing friends, coping with separation from siblings, and wondering if they will ever have anyone to call mom or dad again. What's worse is that nearly 28,000 youth age out of foster care each year, never having been adopted, often going through life alone, without the support systems children with permanent families have, not to mention sharing holiday traditions or a family meal. As the co-chair of both the Congressional Coalition on Adoption and the Foster Youth Caucus, I look forward to continuing working in a bipartisan fashion to identify solutions to improve the quality of life for our nation's most vulnerable children. National Adoption Day reminds us that it is our responsibility and in our best interest to find solutions to ensure children have the opportunity to live in a safe and loving home. Nearly 48 million Americans have considered adopting from foster care, according to a recent national survey. If just 1 in 500 of these adults adopt, all the 107 children in foster care waiting for adoption would have permanent families to help create Thanksgiving traditions of their own. In closing, in the spirit of giving thanks, I'd like to express sincere gratitude to all of the adoptive parents, relative caregivers, and child welfare caseworkers. Their commitment to improving the lives of today's youth is truly commendable. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Missouri, Ms. Hartzler, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Washington has a problem. It spends more than it brings in, and it has been doing that for a long time. That's why we are over $15 trillion in debt. That's over $46,000 of debt for every American man, woman, and child. Washington is currently borrowing 36 out of every dollar it spends, 36 cents out of every dollar it spends. And under President Obama, our national debt has increased 34%. That's the fastest increase in the debt under any U.S. president in history. Our government is digging a hole it might never get out of. We don't have the money, yet big government hasn't been able to restrain itself and keeps putting more and more of its spending on a credit card, our children's credit card. Our national debt to GDP ratio rivals that of countries like Ireland, Portugal, and Greece, which are facing sovereign debt crises. Soon, our nation's federal debt will equal our GDP. It's a losing proposition. It's like someone's total credit card debt equaling the total amount of income that they bring in each year. And so, what do people do? If they do that at home, unfortunately, a lot of people go and get another credit card, and they borrow money from that to pay the minimum on the first credit card, but then they have to go and get another credit card to pay the minimum on that one, to pay the minimum on that one. It doesn't work. It spirals down and down until finally it ends in bankruptcy. It's unsustainable. Most American families understand that. They live within their means. Washington should too. I grew up watching my mom and my dad wrestle with balancing the budget on our family farm. They would sit down around the kitchen table at the start of the year and develop a cash flow projection for the upcoming year, listing the expenses that would be necessary to put in the crop and projecting the anticipated yields and prices to see how we were going to fare and to ensure we didn't go over budget. Then my parents would monitor it throughout the year to see how it was doing. My mother would spend hours with her pencil erasing and adjusting the budget as conditions changed, either up or down. They used to make my sister and I sit down and participate in the process with them. And I can tell you, as a child, we weren't that thrilled with this tedious task because sometimes it would take hours. But now I'm thankful that they did, and they had the foresight to teach us the importance of balancing a budget. I conveyed that importance to my students when I used to teach personal family finance as a home economics teacher. I tell the students that when you budget, the expenses shouldn't be more than the income. They got it. Washington should too. Now we have the opportunity this week to bring the common sense and the business sense of American families and American small businesses to Washington to force it to live within its means by passing the Balanced Budget Amendment. I firmly believe that this constitutional amendment is the best way to restrain the out-of-control federal spending of big government. 49 states have some form of a balanced budget requirement, and it works for them. I know it works for Missouri, and I believe it will work at our nation's capital, too. When I was a Missouri state representative, we budgeted according to the revenue projection given us and designed our budget to match the income. If we didn't have the money, we didn't spend it. Because of that, Missouri is on sound financial footing. Clearly, Washington is not, because it has failed to balance its budget. Passing the Balanced Budget Amendment will force Washington to cut up these credit cards and to start living within its means. Families are tightening their belts at home to make ends meet. Our federal government needs to do likewise. President Ronald Reagan understood the importance of the Balanced Budget Amendment. He said, "Only a constitutional amendment will do the job. We've tried the carrot, and it failed. With the stick of a balanced budget amendment, we can stop government squandering, overtaxing ways, and save our economy." That's why I'm excited about this historic vote that we're going to take tomorrow, and I urge all of my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, to get behind this common-sense provision that will set us back on the path to a strong financial footing. Now is the time to stop the reckless course that we are on and get things right. I look forward to applying the cash flow knowledge I learned around the kitchen table as a child to our federal budget. It worked at home. It's time to make it work in Washington. I yield back my time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are unsung heroes and heroines among us. These are the persons who overcome great challenges just to do the ordinary. They're not born into plenty, they're often born into poverty. But they have lives that are rich in that they overcome great obstacles in life just so that they can be of benefit to the lives of others. One such heroine was born on January 26, 1934. She passed last week on November 9, 2011. Her story is one that I would hope we would remember simply because it exemplifies the life of a person who met challenges, did everything that was required, played by the rules, and sometimes these persons go unnoticed. Lola Mae Bolden Davis, born in Texas, Anderson, Texas, to Arlie Pratt Sanders and Charlie Bolden. She was their second born. She attended Allen Farm School up to the 8th grade. She joined Rock West Baptist Church. At age 16, she moved to Houston, Texas, and acquired her first job as a housekeeper. At age 18, she met the love of her life, Reuben George Davis, Sr. A year later, they had their first child, Pamela. She went on to attend Franklin Beauty School. Eventually, she opened her own business. It was known as the Lola Davis Beauty Nook. She later had 3 additional children, Reuben, Paula, and Renwick. She was hired at Texas Instruments in 1969, and while she was working there, she received her GED. Later, she received her associate degree from Houston Community College. She enrolled at Texas Southern University and graduated with a degree in education. She taught in the Houston Independent School District. Mind you, this is a person who dropped out of high school, received the GED, went on to get an associate degree, got her degree in education, and now she's teaching in the Houston Independent School District. She was known as Grandma Davis to her students. Her son, Reuben, became a constable in Harris County. He is still the constable in Fort Bend County, not Harris, Fort Bend County. And her children have done well. She played by the rules. She did not receive all of the awards that one might receive who has excelled and made a great contribution by way of an invention, or maybe a great contribution by way of having been elected to public office. But she did do this. She was a good citizen who did the right thing, took care of her family, and produced offsprings who have done well. So today I salute her as an unsung heroine. Thank God for the many unsung heroes and heroines who are at the very foundation of what makes this nation great. God bless you, God bless the United States of America, and God bless our unsung heroes and heroines. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Garrett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, gentlemen. Speaker, I rise today to speak in favor of a balanced budget amendment, and some would say as the only solution to our current fiscal crisis. You know, statesmen throughout history of our republic have stressed the importance of fiscal responsibility. But it's the voice of Thomas Jefferson that I think we must pay particular attention to. You know, Thomas Jefferson bore the burden of debt throughout his entire life. And some historians have argued that Jefferson's personal experiences have influenced his thinking about the public debt as well. You know, Jefferson inherited a significant amount of debt at the young age of 31, and some say his own spending added to that and worsened his financial condition personally during his life. And when he died, he unfortunately passed his debt on to his descendants. And that is exactly what this federal government is doing now to future generations today. So if the federal government says that it's so concerned about the welfare of our children and the next generation, then we should be taking time right now to address this staggering public debt that our children and our grandchildren will stand to inherit if our leaders here in Congress fail to have the courage to do what? To cut spending and to balance our budget and to live within our means. You know, Jefferson had a moral message to the future public servants in this regard. He believed that those who are entrusted by their constituents to represent them, as he said, shall consider themselves unauthorized to saddle posterity with our debts and morally bound to pay them ourselves. Now, Jefferson expanded on this message in a letter that he later wrote to James Madison in 1798 when he said, "Neither the representatives of a nation, the whole nation itself assembled, can validly engage debts beyond what they can pay in their own lifetime." Still writing to Madison, he explicitly endorsed a balanced budget amendment stating, "With respect to future debts, would it not be wise and just for a nation to declare in its Constitution that neither the legislature nor the nation itself can validly contract more debt than that it can pay for when it's in its own age?" So what would Jefferson think about where we are in this country today? Now, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has projected that maintaining all of our current spending would eventually require that the middle class in this country would have to have a tax rate of almost 2/3 of all their income, 63%. And the small businesses in the country would have to see their tax rates skyrocket up to 88% in order to cover all the spending. These numbers have a real impact on the lives of individuals, on families, and on businesses. So if Congress were then to keep on spending and have to raise taxes this much, as CBO prescribed, Congress would do what? They would basically doom our families to a crushing tax burden, and they would smother the ability of businesses to expand and therefore to create jobs. See, the economy and the economics of all this is very clear. If we refuse to address our spending problems, tax rates are going to have to rise. And if they will rise in such a manner that would commit future generations to a tax burden to pay for what? To pay for spending of today. So we now, as often is the case, stand at a crossroads. We can continue to do as we have done in the past, and that is to overspend and to borrow and put this burden on our children, or we can do something else. We can demonstrate our commitment to a balanced budget by making it the supreme law of the land in this country. So let me conclude then with a final quote from Jefferson. He stated this: "To preserve the people's independence, we must not let our government load us up with perpetual debt. We must make a selection now between economy and liberty, or profusion and servitude." So let's make Jefferson's dream a reality. Let us pass a balanced budget amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Kaptur, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, thank goodness some Americans continue to analyze the real causes of job loss and turmoil in our economy. I would like to include in the record a few recent articles on the Wall Street perpetrators of this crisis. While all eyes are on Europe, the problem just isn't in Greece. On October 31st, U.S.-based MF Global Holdings Limited filed for Chapter 11. It reportedly is the 8th largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. Its failure, like the crash in 2008, revolves around the actions of money traders using slick instruments called credit derivatives. As analysts try to piece together what happened at MF Global, one word seems to keep popping up: fraud. In a recent posting, attorney William Black describes the failure of our justice system to investigate, and I quote, accounting control fraud as a systemic risk that underlies the damage still being done. The collapse of MF Global has garnered massive attention, partly because John Corzine sat at its helm. Mr. Corzine is the former chief executive officer of infamous Goldman Sachs. He also is a former U.S. Senator and former governor of New Jersey. Mr. Corzine's firm even held a special status as a primary dealer at the New York Federal Reserve. That's like the good housekeeping stamp of approval. Mr. Corzine isn't the only former government leader whose cozy relationship with the financial services industry is being publicly questioned. Former Speaker of this House, Newt Gingrich, appears to have had a significant financial relationship with Freddie Mac, one of the mortgage industry giants led by its management into financial ruin. Freddie Mac played a key role in the financial meltdown. As countless American families have lost their homes, Freddie Mac assumed the toxic assets that were handed to it from the banks, and it is now under conservatorship of the federal government, living off the taxpayer dime. Mr. Gingrich is apparently $1.8 million richer, though he claims he isn't sure how much Freddie paid him. I now see why Congress has consistently failed to investigate what happened at Freddie Mac along with Fannie Mae to determine exactly what decisions by whom and when led to this financial ruin. I have a bill to do just that. H.R. 2093, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac Commission Act. It's well past time to pass it, and I invite members to join me in this effort. The allegations against MF Global are serious. Mr. Corzine's firm had essentially placed $6.3 billion of a bet on the sovereign debt of several European governments. After its most recent quarterly return showed an almost $200 million in losses, MF's global stock lost 67% of its value. But this is not just a case of an investment firm being lured by the higher returns of riskier bonds. CME Group Incorporated, who audited MF Global's accounts, found that Mr. Corzine's company violated key requirements to keep its accounts separate from its clients. The details are still being sorted out, but as much as $600 million appears to be missing from customer accounts. The financial press is reporting a staggering amount of malfeasance in the days before MF Global filed for bankruptcy. In an apparent effort to buy themselves time, MF Global sent checks instead of wiring money. The checks turned out to be bogus. There are stories of requests to transfer funds being denied and even inaccurate account statements being issued. Even more egregious are accounts of people receiving bounced checks, going back and finding that their accounts were also altered inappropriately. If this isn't fraud, what is? What should concern all of us is the knowledge that fraud is not limited to a case here or there. In the financial services sector, fraud has become systemic. In 2009, the FBI testified before the House Judiciary Committee, and I quote, "The current financial crisis has produced one unexpected consequence. It has exposed prevalent fraud schemes that have been thriving in the global financial system. These fraud schemes are not new, but they are coming to light as a result of market deterioration." This isn't the first time our country has seen a massive crime wave in the financial services industry. In the 1980s, it was the savings and loan crisis, and the FBI responded with a staff of 1,000 agents and forensic experts based in 27 cities. That crisis was much smaller than what we are seeing today, yet today the FBI only has a couple hundred agents able to investigate. I have a bill, H.R. 1350, that asks that number to be increased by 1,000. I ask my colleagues to help co-sponsor it, and let's bring some reason and justice back to the financial markets of our country and justice to the American people. Mr. Speaker, I thank you and yield back my remaining time.
The gentlelady yields.